Hi and welcome back. In today's video, which is the first part of the series, Collections and Dictionaries, we will talk about collections. In my next video, which I'll post on Monday, we will cover dictionaries. Now, collections and dictionaries, they allow you to refer to related group of items as one object. And probably this is the reason why it becomes very easy to handle with these related group of items. Collections like arrays also allow you to work with related group of items. Now, if you're not aware what arrays are, then I recommend watching the video VBA arrays in Microsoft Excel 365 for Windows. When I say related group of items, I don't mean of the same data type. They can be of different data types. For example, name of employees, name of cars, name of states. And if you're not aware of what a data type is, then I recommend watching the video VBA variables, data types and constants in Microsoft Excel 365 for Windows. Now, collections and arrays both can store data, but there are 6 significant differences between them. Let's see what those are. The first one is, as I mentioned, in a collection you can have items of different data type. However, in an array, you can use a single data type. For example, in an employee collection, you can add name, date of birth, and job band. Whereas, in an array of numeric values, you cannot add a string value. Second, collections are single dimension, unlike arrays, which can not only be single dimensional but also multi-dimensional. Third, deleting an item from an array is not that simple. You can set the value to blank in an array, but the slot is already allocated in the memory which will hold a blank value. You will have to create a new array and then port the values to that in case you want to remove that particular slot. In case of collections, you have .add and .remove methods. We will use these methods later in the video. Fourth, it is easier to search or retrieve data from a collection because it has keys. In case of an array, you have to loop through the array. There are ways to check if an item is in an array or not without looping, but that is what I call an out-of-box solution. In array, you do not have keys to directly access the data. Fifth, collections are read-only, whereas the values in the array can be changed. To change a value in the collection, you will have to remove the item from the collection and then re-add the edited value. This does not hold true if the collection is a built-in collection, an object like workbooks, worksheets, range, or cells. Sixth, once you have dimensioned the array, you have to use redim to add more items. In case of collections, there is no such need. The collection automatically resizes itself. Let's create our first collection. We will now launch the Visual Basic Editor. If you're not sure what Visual Basic Editor is, then I recommend watching the video Visual Basic Editor and Introduction. We will press the shortcut key Alt F11 to launch the Visual Basic Editor. Once the Visual Basic Editor is launched, right-click on the VBA project and under Insert, click on Module to insert a new module. I'm going to declare a procedure called sub collection underscore example. There are two main types of collections, built-in collections and user-defined collections. Let's understand what are built-in collections. The most common example of built-in collection objects are the workbooks, worksheets, range, and cell collections. I've already spoken about these objects in Understanding Excel Object Model in Office 365. I've also covered how to loop through them using the 5 different loops in the video Understanding 5 Loops in Microsoft Excel 365 for Windows. A user-defined collection refers to related group of items which you as a user have put together. For example, name of employees, name of states, name of cars, etc. etc. So let's create a collection of, let's say, employee names. A collection can be created the same way other objects are created. If you're not aware how dim is used, then this is the good time to watch the video dim versus set in Excel 365 for Windows. So we declare using dim employees as collection. Once we have declared a collection, let's initialize it using set. Set employees is equal to new collection. So what we saw here is in these two lines, we declared and initialized a collection. If you want, you can declare and initialize in one line as well. So all you have to do is just put the new keyword before the collection and you can delete this line. So the two lines got replaced by one line. Dim employees as new collection. You're declaring and initializing the collection in one line. Before we add an item to the collection, let's understand the syntax of adding an item. The syntax is add item key before after. Item is an expression of any type that specifies the member to add to the collection. The key is optional. It is a unique string expression that specifies a key string that can be used instead of a positional index to access a member of the collection. Before, which is also optional, is an expression that specifies a relative position in the collection. The member to be added is placed in the collection before the member identified by the before argument. After is also optional. It is an expression that also specifies a relative position in the collection. The member to be added is placed in the collection after the member identified by the after argument. Now let's add few employee names to this collection. You can simply do that by typing the name of the collection and then by pressing the period and then typing add. For example, employees dot add and then the employee name. So let's say Siddharth. Let's add two more names. So I will type employees again. Dot add John Doe. Employees dot add Jane Doe. So we have three names in this collection. This is how simple it is to add items to a collection. To access the items in a collection, you can use any of the 5 loops as shown in the video, Understanding 5 Loops in Microsoft Excel 365 for Windows. For this particular example, we will use the for each loop. So I'll type dim item as variant for each item in employees, next item, MSG box item. Now let's run this. Click on the Run Sub User Form button or simply press the shortcut key F5. When we run this, I get the names in the collection, which is Siddharth, John Doe and Jane Doe. As mentioned in one of my previous video, we can also get the count of the items in the collection using .count. What I'm going to do is I'm going to comment this for a moment and then I can type MSG box employees .count. So when I run this, I should get 3 because there are 3 names. Let's test it. And I get 3. Since we know the number of items in a collection, you can also access a particular item using the index number. So if I want to know the name of the employee in the second index of the collection, I can do that by start parenthesis, the index number and close parenthesis. This way I will get the name. So if I visually look at it, the name at the second index is John Doe. So if I run this, I should get John Doe. Let's check it. And we get John Doe. Similarly, if I want to know which is the name in the first index, I can type the index number and I can run it and I will get Siddharth. Now let's understand what are keys. We will change this code to add keys. We will then use the keys to access the item in the collection. I will explain the advantages of using keys after I show you how to add a key. So I will add a variable dim I as long and I will set the value of I as 5. We will use this later to access a particular key. Now we have employees.add Siddharth. Let's press comma after that. And you will notice that I'm being prompted for a key. Now the key has to be a string expression. So I will type CSTR and I. I want to give this I as the key. And since the key is unique, I'll have to increment the value by 1. I equal to I plus 1. Similarly, I can do the same thing here. So I added I as the key and then I again incremented it, and then I will use the I again to add it as a key. The main advantage of adding keys is that if the order of the items are changed, then you can still access the relevant item using the key. In such a case, you cannot use an index number because the order would have changed. The other advantage is that your code becomes more readable. Let's understand this using an example. So right now, message box employees 1 will give me Sid Rout. See? I can also access Sid Rout by the key, which is 5. So I can type this as 5 and it will give me Sid Rout. Similarly, for 7, it will give me John Doe because I added 1 here and then again 1 here. So 5 plus 1, 6 plus 1, 7. So employee 7 will give me Jane Doe. So here we saw how to access a particular element of a collection either using an index number or using its key. Now let's understand the second optional parameter in the syntax, which is before. You use the before parameter to specify where you want to place the item in the collection. Let's say I want to move Jane Doe before Sid Rout, then this is how I would do it. I will press a comma and you will notice that I'm being prompted for before. Now I want to move it before Sid Rout. So moving it before Sid Rout would be position 1. Now in such a scenario, accessing the value using the key will still give me Jane Doe, but if I use the index number 1, I will not get Sid Rout. I will get Jane Doe. Let's check it. So if I run this, see how I get Jane Doe. But if I change this to index number 1, I will not get Sid Rout. I will get Jane Doe because Jane Doe has moved up. So this is what I had mentioned earlier, that if the order of the items are changed, you can still access the relevant item using the key. In such a case, you cannot use an index number. And if I use the loop now to see where the items are placed, you will notice that Jane Doe has moved up. Jane Doe, Sid Rout, John Doe. If I don't mention the before parameter, then the sequence remains Sid Rout, John Doe and Jane Doe. So we saw how we can place an item before a particular member using the before parameter. Just like we use the before parameter, we can also use the after parameter to specify where you want to place the item in the collection. Let's say I want to move Jane Doe after Sid Rout. Then this is how I would do it. I will delete 1, I'll keep the before parameter blank and then I'll press comma again. This time it is asking me for an after parameter. So I will type 1. Now if I run this, can you guess what would be the sequence? Will it be Sid Rout, John Doe, Jane Doe? Or Jane Doe, Sid Rout, John Doe? Let's check it. So when I run this, I get Sid Rout, Jane Doe and John Doe. So what happened here is I mentioned move Jane Doe after Sid Rout. So the order was changed from Sid, John, Jane to Sid, Jane, John because this moved after Sid Rout. Here also, if you use the index to access the employees collection, if you use employees 2, you will get Jane Doe and not John Doe because the order has changed. So it is better to access the parameter using the key. Now you must be wondering, where would I use keys in a real world scenario? Okay, imagine there are 50 employees in your organization and you are creating a report using Visual Basic for applications and you have to match the names with the employee IDs. Had it been a worksheet report where you're using formulas, you could have used VLOOKUP. But in VBA, what will you do? You have two options. One is either you loop through the entire range one by one and match the names against an employee ID, or you can store the entire range in an array, but ultimately you'll have to loop there as well. This is where the keys come into play. You can store the employee ID as the key so that you can directly access the employee name via the employee ID in the entire collection. So if I have, let's say, employee ID 10001 and I want to know the name of the employee, I don't have to loop through the entire data. I can just use the 10001 key to retrieve the data. So let's make the change into the code and see how this works. So I'm going to this time remove these variables, I'm going to use a proper employee ID. So I will say employees.add Siddharth CSTR, and let's say the employee ID is 100001, and I add the double quote. I'll delete this line and I will delete this line as well, and then I will copy this and I will paste it here and here. Next, I will change it to 2 and 3. So now we have got 3 unique employee IDs. Let's delete this loop as well. Now, if I use this employee ID, see what do I get? I should get John Doe, and I do get John Doe. Now let's see how can we add items to a collection from a range in a worksheet. So I'll go back to the worksheet and I will type, let's say, employee ID and name here. So the first one is 10001. Here I will type Siddharth. Then I have 10002 and 3. Then I have John Doe and Jane Doe. Let's go back to the code. Let's insert a new module. I will create a procedure called sub-range2collection. Since the data is in sheet 1, let's declare our worksheet object, and then we will loop through the cells in the worksheet to get the data from the cells and store it in a collection. So I will say dim ws as worksheet. Since we are going to loop through the cells, let's declare a counter variable dim I as long. Next, we will declare a collection dim employees as new collection. And to loop through the collection, we need an item. So dim item as variant. We will initialize a worksheet object. Set ws is equal to this workbook dot sheets sheet 1. Now, if you look at the worksheet, the item names are from the 2nd row to the 4th row. So what we will do is we will add the items using a loop for I equal to 2 to 4 next I, and then I will type employees dot add ws dot cells. The row would be I because that's the counter, and the column will be 2 because that's where the names are. If you go back here, the names are in the 2nd column. Dot value 2, and then we will press the comma to add the key, and we will add the employee ID as the key. The key has to be a string value, so I will type CSTR start parenthesis, and then I will copy this part and I will paste it here again, and this time I'll change the column to 1 and I will close parenthesis, and we are done. To check what we have in this collection, let's use the for each loop for each item in employees. Next item, MSG box item. Now when I run this, let's see what do we get. Siddharth, John Doe and Jane Doe. As I mentioned earlier, the key is optional, and it is a unique string expression that specifies a key string that can be used. This makes it impossible to add another item with the same key. So if I go back to, let's say, module 1, and if I change this to 1 again, see what happens when I run this. It says the key is already associated with an element of this collection, and if I debug it, it will highlight this line. That means I can't use this key again. Going back to that code. This in fact is also good because we can then use this to create something what is called a unique collection. Let's understand this with an example. I'm going back to the worksheet and I'm going to copy these names and paste it again and again and again. Okay, so I've got now multiple names here. What if I only wanted to get a list of unique names, that is Siddharth, John Doe and Jane Doe? How will I get it? So let's go back to the code. I'm going to copy this data and I'm going to insert a new module, and I'll paste it here, and I'll change the name to unique collection. This time, instead of adding the employee ID as the key, I'm going to add the name as the key itself. Okay, so I will change this to 2. Now, if I run this code, I'll obviously get the same error because the key cannot be repeated. It has to be unique. So what we will do is we will sandwich this .add code between on error resume next and on error go to 0. So I will press enter here. I will type on error resume next, and below that I will type on error go to 0, and we are done. So what does on error resume next and on error go to 0 do? I will talk about error handling in my next week's video in detail, but I'll give you a brief gist of what is happening in this code. When this code runs and when we try to add an item with the same key as this name of the item, there will be an error and the item will not get added. What will happen is when the code runs, the code will try to add an item with the same key again. Obviously, there will be an error and the item will not get added as the key has to be unique. Since there is on error resume next, the code will not break. It will continue the loop to add the next item. And in the end, I will only get a list of unique names. Let's run this and see whether we get the unique names. I'm also going to change the row from 2 to 13. So I go back and I change this to 2 to 13. Now let's run this. And I get Sid Rout, John Doe and Jane Doe. If I wouldn't have specified this, then I would have got an error. Let's check it. See, this key is already associated with an element of this collection, and when I press debug and I see the value of I, it says I equal to 5. So if I go back to the code, 5 is Sid Rout and Sid Rout has already been added in the list. This is the reason why we padded this between on error resume next and on error go to 0. So here we saw how to create a unique collection. Now let's understand how to remove an item from a collection using dot remove. For that, let's go back to module 1. Once you have added an item, you can use dot remove to remove an item. So I will type employees dot remove space and it is asking you the index number. Let's try and remove the second index, which is John Doe. And there's a reason why am I removing the second and not the third or the one. Here I'm using this message box to access John Doe and I'm using employee.remove to remove that particular item. So if I copy this and I paste it after this again, let's see what happens. So I run this, I get John Doe and then I get an error, invalid procedure call or argument, because this key does not exist anymore because we already removed the item from the collection using employees.remove index number 2. If I change this to 2, I will now get John Doe because Jane Doe has moved to the second index. This also highlights one important drawback of using keys in a collection. You can never know from before whether a particular key exists in a collection or not. Obviously, there are ways that you can do that. You can write a user-defined function to check whether a key is there in the collection or not. But by default, there is no direct way of knowing whether a key exists in a collection or not. Since we are at it, I might as well show you how to check whether a key exists in a collection or not. For that, I will create a function. Private function is key valid, call as collection, key as string, as boolean. If you're not aware how a function works or how to evaluate a value and return a value from a function, then I highly recommend watching the video What are sub-procedures and function procedures in Microsoft Excel 365 for Windows. I'll declare a variable dim my item as variant. Now this variable my item will store a value if a value is returned when I use something like employees and the key. At the same time, I have to also understand that this may give an error if the key is not present. So what I will do is I will use on error resume next. And what I'll also do is I will also ensure that if there are any errors from the previous code, then it is cleared. Next, I will try and attempt to return a value using the key. So I will say my item is equal to call and the key. So what will happen is if the key is valid, my item will get a value. If the key is not valid, then there will be an error, but I'll not be shown an error and the code will not break because of on error resume next. And in the next line, I will check if there was any error which happened or not. So I will type if error.number is equal to 0. That means no error happened. Then is key valid is equal to true. And finally, I will reset. I will type on error go to 0 and we are done. If you remember when we used this here, we got an error. So when I run this, I get John Doe, and when I click on OK, the item will be removed from index 2 and then we will try to access that item using the key. And I get the error. So now we will use our function to check whether a key is valid or not and then display the relevant message box. So I will copy this and I will type here, if is key valid, start parenthesis employees, comma, key, which is 1002, close parenthesis, is equal to true, then show me this message box. Else, message box, key does not exist. End if. If you're not aware how the if then else statement works, then I highly recommend watching the video if then else statement in Microsoft Excel 365 for Windows. Now, when I run this, I get John Doe. The moment I'll click on OK, the item will be removed and I get the message box, key does not exist. So the code does not error out anymore because this function checked whether it is true or false and then executed the relevant statement. So here we saw how to check whether the key exists in a collection or not. Okay, time for a quick recap. In this video, which is the first video of the series Collections and Dictionaries, we spoke about collections. In the next video, which I'll post on Monday, we will talk about dictionaries. So in this video, we understood what are collections and how the collection object provides us a very convenient way to deal with the similarly related group of items as one object. And probably that's the reason why we understood why it becomes very easy to work with them. We also learned about the differences between arrays and collection. We also learned how to add items to a collection using .add. We also learned the significance of keys. We also understood how to add a particular item in a collection using before and after to add them at a certain position. If you still have any questions, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below, or you can also email me on support@teamexcel.com and I will get back to you within 48 hours. Just a quick reminder, I'll be posting 2 videos every week, one on Monday and the other on Thursday. If you like the kind of content that I'm putting up in this channel, if you really like the videos, you like the way I'm presenting them, then go ahead and extend your support by watching the playlist where everything is in a particular sequence or other videos and dropping a couple of likes. And if you still have not subscribed to this channel, then go ahead and subscribe to this channel by clicking on the bell icon. And I will see you on Monday when I talk to you about dictionaries.